Hello class, this is lecture 10, session 10, and the topic is implementation guidelines. I want to talk about the elements of a strategic plan. There are 6 basic and standard elements that should go into every strategic plan. It should begin with an executive summary, typically 1 page, which can be shared with staff easily and external stakeholders such as funders and other related collaborative agencies. Then it should include a list of the planning team members who participated, including subgroups. A background description of the organization to give context. Then the mission, vision, and values statements that we've talked so much about previous in the course. Then a description of each goal and objective and what strategies will be implemented. Sometimes they include tactics, but most of the time the tactics are delegated to the individual program or department who will implement it as an owner. And then the appendixes, which include summary of background materials, maybe a SWOT analysis results, different questionnaires and surveys used online or in face-to-face interviews. Make sure you keep the plan simple and flexible so that it is easily changeable when circumstances, either internal, external, change. You don't want to overwhelm your internal folks and those charged with buy-in, acceptance, and implementation if they don't need to see all the intricacies of the plan. In distributing the plan, ask yourself the following questions. Who needs to see it, and who do you want to know? So who needs to know, and who do you want to know? That's one question. And then the other question is, and how much do you want them to know? Not everybody needs to see the whole entire plan to understand what their change is and their role in it. So staff might see the executive summary and maybe those goals that relate to their programs. And then you can communicate the broader big picture before you distribute the smaller pieces. The buy-in begins, of course, at the top with senior leaders, which then includes middle managers, first-line supervisors, and then line staff. Everyone needs to know what is happening, why is it happening, and their expected roles. Be real clear during this communication phase that there isn't a glitch and some people don't filter the information down. When you go to my lecture number 11, next week, you will hear from Paula Goldstein, who will talk more about the leader's role in communicating the strategic plan and its various parts throughout the organization. Buy-in occurs when people understand what you're asking them to do and how it ties into the big picture. Explain to them what you need them to do and how you will support them. And here's the gist of that communication. Here's what a leader must do in terms of providing all the information. There are 5 things. Number 1, communicate, here's what I think the change will look like. Number 2, here's why it's happening. Number 3, here's how it will affect you. You as an employee, you as a service provider, you as a department or program staff member. Here's what you can do to make it work better for everyone. And lastly, and here's what I'll do to help. So communication really is broad-based and it includes those major points. Now, part of the leadership's responsibility is to establish responsibility and accountability for the execution of the plan. So from senior managers to middle managers to first-line supervisors to line staff, here's what has to happen. First, an owner must be assigned. Remember, we talked about owners earlier on in the course. And this owner, who could be a department head, is responsible for creating the action plan and the tactics that address the specific goal and objective assigned to them. Then they need to create a monitoring plan. Is it going to be quarterly? Is it going to be more often or less often? As part of accountability, they must report to the team leader on progress and results and decide how often this should occur. Perhaps at the beginning of an implementation, it should happen more often, and as time goes on, it becomes less frequent, but there's always that piece of accountability. And here's a recommendation that I have. When an owner is selected, and this gets communicated, be sure to fold the owner's responsibilities into that person's job description, and then it becomes part of the performance appraisal process. Remember the old saying, what gets measured gets managed. And so if it's part of performance appraisal, it will happen. Part of the action plan includes milestones and deliverables. Milestones, of course, are what do you expect to occur at the end of 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. Deliverables really are the more hardcore data, and there are two kinds. The first one is called process measures. It tells you something has been done. If you were having a fundraising campaign, how many thank you notes were sent within 2 weeks of receiving the donation? If you're having a new member recruitment, how many new members were recruited and how many letters were sent thanking them and welcoming them within a certain period of time. Those are called process measures. It tells you that something has been done. The second measurable outcome is called outcome measures. It tells you the impact or the outcome of your effort. For example, if you're looking to increase employee retention, let's say by 15% at the end of 1 year, can you measure that? Should you measure that? How do you measure that? It is definitely measurable. So that's an outcome measure. If you were having your member recruitment from a synagogue or a JCC, and you intended to increase members by 10%, you definitely can measure that. So there are two kinds of deliverables that we call process measures and outcome measures. So part of milestones and deliverables is to have a timetable for check-in, and then know what you're checking in on, your process measures and your outcome measures. Now there are various formats that help you collect this data and monitor them. They're called dashboards and scorecards. And for those of you who want more information on that, you can seek this from Amazon.com, who have lots of resources on dashboards and scorecards. Lastly, I want to talk about how you roll out a project. You can roll it out all at once, or you can roll it out in increments. The more radical and transformative and new the change is, the more important it might be to launch a pilot program to test how the change will work. You don't want to go full barrels into a major transformative change without testing the various pieces, particularly if it involves new reporting forms, the use of technology. People need to be trained. There are always glitches. You want to test it. Rollout is important incrementally by department or unit before implementation, before the whole organization. More of these types of rollout changes, both incremental and full, will be discussed in sessions 12 and 13. So that concludes my lecture on implementation guidelines.